Hansol stood on the bridge of the Teguk and watched the stars through the main viewport. He had been a ship captain for 12 years, but this mission felt different. Today, humanity would meet another intelligent species for the first time. The diplomatic team had prepared for months. They brought gifts, translation programs, and messages of peace. Everyone believed this would be a historic moment of friendship and cooperation. The sensors detected the alien fleet before anyone could see them. 30 massive ships appeared on the screen, each one 3 times larger than the Teguk. Hansol felt his heart beat faster, but he kept his face calm. His crew looked at him for guidance, and he gave them a confident nod. The communications officer opened a channel and transmitted the prepared greeting in multiple frequencies. The response came quickly, but it was not what anyone expected. The alien message was simple and cold. They called themselves the Vryn Empire. They had conquered 40 star systems. They gave humanity one choice: surrender immediately or be destroyed. The diplomatic team looked shocked. This was supposed to be a peaceful meeting, not a threat. Hansol read the message 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. The Vryn were not interested in friendship or trade. They wanted complete submission. They expected humans to give up their freedom without even fighting. He thought about Earth's history, about all the times people had faced impossible odds and refused to quit. He thought about his grandmother's stories of survival and resistance. He turned to his communications officer and spoke clearly so everyone on the bridge could hear. "Send them this message," he said. "Tell them that humanity does not kneel. Tell them we would rather die free than live as slaves." The officer hesitated for just a moment, understanding the weight of those words, then transmitted the message. The Vryn response was immediate and violent. Energy weapons fired from their lead ships, targeting the 3 escort vessels that accompanied the Teguk. The attacks were precise and devastating. The first ship exploded in a ball of fire. The second ship lost power and began drifting. The third ship managed to activate emergency shields, but they would not last long. Hansol watched his screen as the attack continued. He felt anger burning in his chest, but his mind stayed clear and focused. This was exactly the kind of situation his training had prepared him for. The Vryn expected fear and panic. They expected humans to beg for mercy or try to run away. They were about to learn something important about humanity. "All stations, battle analysis mode," Hansol commanded. "Record everything. Weapon signatures, shield frequencies, firing patterns, ship movements. I want complete data on every aspect of their attack. Send it all to the network in real time." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, their fingers flying across control panels. The Teguk was not a warship. It was designed for exploration and diplomacy, with minimal weapons and light armor, but it had something the Vryn did not expect: the most advanced sensor systems humanity had ever built. Every second of the attack was being recorded in perfect detail. Every energy signature was being analyzed. Every tactical decision the Vryn made was being studied and transmitted across the human communication network. Thousands of light years away, military analysts received the data. Scientists began working on countermeasures. Engineers started designing new weapons. Within an hour of the first attack, every human ship in known space had detailed information about Vryn technology and tactics. This was how humanity had survived on Earth. When faced with a stronger predator, humans did not give up. They learned. They adapted. They shared knowledge and worked together. The damaged escort ship finally lost its shields and took a direct hit. It broke apart, and Hansol felt each loss like a knife in his heart. Those were his people, his fellow humans, dying because they had chosen to extend a hand in friendship, but he could not let emotion control him now. The data they were gathering would save thousands of lives in the future. "Captain, we should retreat," his tactical officer said. "We cannot fight them. We need to get this data back to Earth safely." Hansol nodded. The officer was right. Their mission now was survival and information. "Execute emergency jump procedures," he ordered. Maximum distance. Random vector. The Teguk's engines roared to life. Space twisted around the ship as it prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. The Vryn fired again, trying to stop them, but the human ship was already moving. In a flash of light, the Teguk disappeared, leaving the Vryn fleet behind. In the command ship of the Vryn fleet, Admiral Thask watched the human vessel escape. He felt satisfied with the encounter. The humans had been properly intimidated. They had seen the power of the Vryn Empire and fled like frightened animals. Soon they would send messages of surrender, begging for mercy and offering tribute. But Admiral Thask was wrong. He did not understand what had just happened. The Vryn had evolved on a world where strength meant everything. Their culture valued direct confrontation and overwhelming force. They had conquered other species by showing superior firepower and accepting immediate surrender. They had never fought an enemy that treated defeat as a learning opportunity. Humans were different. On Earth, the apex predators were not always the strongest or the fastest. They were the smartest and most adaptable. Humans had survived ice ages and droughts. They had learned to hunt animals much larger and more powerful than themselves. They had turned every setback into a lesson and every defeat into motivation. As the Teguk traveled through hyperspace toward safety, Hansol reviewed the data they had collected. He could already see patterns in how the Vryn fought. Their tactics were effective but predictable. Their weapons were powerful but had clear limitations. Their shields operated on frequencies that could be disrupted. Everything they did followed standard procedures without variation. He sent a message to Earth Command with his initial analysis. The Vryn are strong, he wrote, but they are not flexible. They expect enemies to fight like them. They have no experience with guerrilla tactics, deception, or adaptive strategies. We can beat them, but we need to fight smart, not just hard. The message reached Earth 3 days later. Military leaders read it carefully. They began planning not for surrender, but for war. They knew this would be difficult. Humanity had never fought a space war before. But they also knew something the Vryn did not. Humans were persistence hunters. Once they started chasing prey, they never stopped. They could pursue for days, weeks, or years until the target collapsed from exhaustion. The Vryn Empire had started something they did not fully understand. They had attacked humanity expecting a quick victory. Instead, they had awakened something ancient and terrifying. They had reminded humans why they became the dominant species on a planet full of larger, stronger, and faster predators. The war that would follow would teach the galaxy an important lesson. Humanity was not the strongest species. They were not the fastest or the most numerous. But they were the most dangerous because they never gave up, never stopped learning, and never forgot an enemy. The hunt had begun. Jiwoo watched the morning sky turn dark with Vryn dropships. She had known this day would come. Intelligence reports warned that the colony world Sebiok was next on the enemy's target list. The planet was young, with only 3,000 human settlers spread across one main town and several farming communities. It was an easy target, or so the Vryn believed. Colonel Jiwoo had arrived 2 weeks earlier with a military advisory team of just 50 soldiers. Her mission was to help the colonists prepare basic defenses, but she had studied military history her entire adult life. She knew that 3,000 civilians and 50 soldiers could not win a conventional battle against 10,000 Vryn warriors, so she decided not to fight a conventional battle. The colonists had been scared at first. They were farmers, teachers, engineers, and families trying to build a new life. They were not soldiers, but Jiwoo explained something important to them. Every human being carried the genes of survivors. Their ancestors had lived through ice ages, plagues, and countless wars. They had the ability to fight and adapt. They just needed to remember how. For 2 weeks, the entire colony had worked day and night. They did not build massive walls or heavy fortifications. Instead, they prepared the town itself to become a weapon. Every building was reinforced and given multiple exit routes. The streets were mapped with careful attention to sight lines and cover positions. Underground tunnels connected key locations. Storage areas were stocked with food, water, medical supplies, and ammunition. Jiwoo had studied guerrilla warfare tactics from Earth's history. She learned from the fighters who had defeated larger armies through patience, intelligence, and deep knowledge of their terrain. She learned from urban combat specialists who turned cities into deadly mazes. She learned from every conflict where a smaller force had survived against impossible odds. Now the Vryn were landing. Their ships descended in perfect military formation, following their standard invasion protocols. They had done this dozens of times before on other worlds. They expected the humans to either surrender or gather for a desperate last stand. They were prepared for both scenarios. But when the Vryn ground forces marched into the town, they found empty streets. Buildings appeared abandoned. There was no massed defense force, no surrender delegation, no panicked civilians running in fear. For a moment, the Vryn commanders were confused. Then the shooting started. The first shots came from a second-story window, taking down 3 Vryn soldiers before they could react. Return fire shattered the window, but the shooter was already gone, moving through a pre-planned route to the next position. More shots came from different directions, from rooftops and doorways and carefully prepared holes in walls. Each burst was short and precise, then the shooter would disappear. The Vryn tried to advance, but every street became a killing zone. Buildings that looked empty suddenly erupted with gunfire. Corners that seemed safe hid deadly traps. The aliens were fighting an enemy they could not see, could not predict, and could not pin down. Their superior numbers meant nothing because they could not bring their full force to bear in the narrow streets and tight spaces. Jiwoo coordinated the defense from a mobile command post that moved locations every 30 minutes. She had divided the colonists into small teams of 5 to 10 people. Each team knew their assigned sector perfectly. They knew every hiding spot, every escape route, every place where they could shoot and then vanish. The teams communicated through a distributed network that was nearly impossible to jam or track. The Vryn sent in their heavy armor, massive walking machines with powerful weapons. But the streets were too narrow for efficient movement, and the armor's sensors were overwhelmed by false signals and decoys. Human defenders destroyed 2 of the machines with mining explosives placed in underground passages. The other machines became cautious, slowing their advance. Hours turned into a full day of fighting. The Vryn were used to quick victories. Their strategy relied on shock and overwhelming force to break enemy morale within the first few hours. But the human defenders showed no signs of breaking. Instead, they seemed to be getting more efficient, learning from each engagement, adapting their tactics to counter Vryn responses. What the Vryn did not understand was that Jiwoo had built rotation schedules into her defense plan. Fighters would engage for 2 hours, then fall back to rest while fresh teams took their positions. This meant her defenders were always alert and effective, while Vryn soldiers grew increasingly tired and stressed. The psychological impact was devastating. Every Vryn warrior knew that any window, any doorway, any pile of rubble could hide a human fighter ready to kill them. On the second day, the Vryn tried a different approach. They began systematically destroying buildings, trying to eliminate hiding places. But this played into Jiwoo's hands. Collapsed buildings created new cover and new obstacles. Rubble-filled streets forced the enemy to slow down even more. The destruction made the battlefield more complex, not simpler. Jiwoo also used psychological warfare. Human speakers broadcast messages in the Vryn language, messages designed to create doubt and fear. We know where you sleep. We know where you eat. We know when you are alone. You cannot see us, but we see you. Every moment you stay here, more of you will die. The messages were not empty threats. Human snipers took special care to target Vryn officers and communications specialists, creating chaos in the enemy command structure. By the third day, the Vryn casualties had reached over 6,000. Their commanders could not believe it. They had lost more than half their force to an enemy that was outnumbered more than 3 to 1. Every tactical doctrine they knew said this was impossible. The humans should have been crushed within hours. Instead, they were winning. The Vryn tried to retreat and regroup, but Jiwoo would not let them rest. Human teams followed them, harassing them constantly, preventing them from establishing secure positions. The aliens who had come to conquer found themselves trapped in a nightmare where safety did not exist, and death could come from any direction at any moment. On the morning of the 4th day, human reinforcements arrived. 3 military ships dropped into orbit and prepared to land ground forces, but they found that the battle was essentially over. The remaining Vryn soldiers were demoralized, disorganized, and desperate to escape. They surrendered quickly, grateful to still be alive. Jiwoo walked through the damaged town, checking on her people. They were exhausted, covered in dust and blood, but alive. She had lost 237 defenders, each death a weight on her heart. But they had held. Against impossible odds, with minimal resources and no heavy weapons, they had defeated a force designed to crush entire worlds. The news of the defense of Sabiok spread across human space like wildfire. People who had been afraid suddenly felt hope. If a small colony could hold against the Vryn Empire, then humanity had a chance. Military analysts studied every detail of the battle, learning from Jiwoo's tactics and strategies. But the story also spread through Vryn space, and there, it created fear. Their warriors told stories of ghost-like enemies who struck without warning and vanished without trace. They spoke of humans who fought for days without rest, who turned simple towns into deadly labyrinths, who refused to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. The psychological damage to Vryn morale would prove just as important as the physical casualties. Jiwoo gave a simple report to the military command. The Vryn are strong when fighting in open space with clear battle lines. They are vulnerable in complex terrain where adaptability matters more than firepower. Their tactics are rigid and predictable. They expect enemies to fight with honor and follow rules. We need to continue using irregular warfare, mobility, and psychological pressure. We can win this war if we fight it our way, not theirs. The defense of Sabyok became a turning point in the war. It proved that humanity could not only survive against the Vryn Empire, but could actively defeat them. It showed that numbers and firepower were not enough against an enemy that thought differently, adapted constantly, and refused to accept defeat. The galaxy was learning something that Earth had known for millions of years. The most dangerous predator is not the strongest one. It is the one that never stops hunting. Admiral Kyungmi stood in the command center of the human fleet's flagship and studied the three-dimensional star map floating before her. Red markers showed Vryn military positions. Blue markers showed human forces. The red outnumbered the blue by almost 4-1. In a traditional military engagement, those odds meant certain defeat. But Kyungmi had no intention of fighting a traditional military engagement. She had spent weeks studying Earth's natural predators, fascinated by how they hunted. Lions worked in coordinated prides, using teamwork to bring down prey much larger than themselves. Wolves pursued their targets for miles, working together to exhaust and confuse. Tigers stalked with infinite patience, striking only when success was certain. Sharks sensed blood in the water from miles away and came swiftly. Each predator had evolved different hunting methods, but they all shared one trait. They did not fight fair. They used every advantage available. The Vryn Empire had built their military strategy around honorable combat. Their battles were frontal assaults where the stronger force won through superior firepower. They announced their attacks, gathered their forces, and engaged in direct confrontation. It had worked for them for decades because most species they encountered fought the same way. Humanity was about to teach them a different kind of warfare. Kyungmi sent her fleet orders. No large battle groups, no predictable patrol routes, no defensive positions. Instead, human ships would operate in small packs of 3 to 5 vessels. They would move constantly, strike without warning, and disappear before the enemy could respond. They would target supply lines, isolated ships, and vulnerable positions. They would make the vast emptiness of space feel like a trap closing around the Vryn. The first attack came 3 days later. A Vryn supply convoy traveling through what they believed was secure space suddenly found themselves surrounded by human ships that seemed to appear from nowhere. The attack lasted less than 10 minutes. Half the convoy was destroyed, the other half crippled. By the time Vryn reinforcements arrived, the human ships were gone, leaving no trace of which direction they had fled. Similar attacks happened across multiple systems. A Vryn patrol group detected human ships and moved to engage, only to realize too late that they had been lured into an ambush. A military station came under bombardment from long range, and when they sent ships to investigate, those ships were picked off one by one. A Vryn admiral ordered his fleet to pursue a damaged human vessel, only to find his forces scattered and vulnerable to counterattack. Kyungmi watched the results with satisfaction. Each engagement was carefully planned. Human intelligence networks gathered information about Vryn movements and schedules. Human ships positioned themselves along likely travel routes. Human scouts identified isolated targets. Then the packs would strike, hitting fast and hard before vanishing back into the darkness of space. The psychological impact was exactly what she had hoped for. Vryn commanders became cautious, second-guessing every decision. They started requesting more escorts for routine missions. They avoided areas where human ships might be hiding. They sent scouts ahead to check for ambushes. All of this slowed their operations and tied up resources in defensive measures. Fear began spreading through the Vryn military. Soldiers on ships knew that they could be attacked at any moment. There was no safe space, no secure route, no guaranteed protection. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. They watched and waited and struck when you were most vulnerable. It was like being hunted by ghosts. Vryn sensor operators started reporting phantom contacts. They would detect what looked like human ships, but when investigated, nothing was there. Sometimes it was sensor glitches. Sometimes it was human deception technology creating false readings. Sometimes it was real human ships that had already moved on. The operators could not tell the difference, so they had to treat every contact as real. This created constant stress and exhaustion. Kyung-mi escalated the campaign. She authorized human ships to begin attacking Vrin mining operations and fuel depots. These targets were lightly defended because they were located far from the front lines. But now nowhere was safe. The Vrin had to divert military resources to protect their industrial infrastructure, which meant fewer ships available for offensive operations. The Admiral also used disinformation as a weapon. False intelligence was leaked, suggesting that humans had developed new superweapons. Captured Vrin ships were found drifting in space with no visible damage, crew dead from mysterious causes. In reality, the ships had been hit by experimental weapons that disrupted life support systems, but the Vrin did not know that. They imagined all sorts of terrifying possibilities. One of Kyung-mi's most effective tactics was the persistence chase. When human ships detected a Vrin vessel, they would pursue it relentlessly. They would follow for hours, sometimes days, always staying just out of weapons range. The Vrin ship would try to shake them, jumping to different systems, but the humans would follow every time. Eventually, the Vrin crew would make a mistake from exhaustion, or their ship would run low on fuel, and the humans would close in for the kill. This was persistence hunting on an interstellar scale. On Earth, ancient humans had hunted large animals by chasing them for hours under the hot sun until the prey collapsed from heat exhaustion. The humans were slower, but they could keep running long after the prey had given up. Now that same strategy was being used in space. Human ships might be individually weaker, but they never stopped, never gave up, never let their target rest. The Vrin military leadership held an emergency council. Their admirals argued about how to respond to this new threat. Some wanted to gather the entire fleet and crush the humans in one massive battle. Others wanted to split forces and protect all their territory. Some suggested negotiation. They could not agree because humans were fighting in ways they had never encountered before. In the end, the Vrin chose the worst possible option. They split their forces, trying to defend everything at once. This gave Kyung-mi exactly what she wanted. Smaller Vrin groups were easier to isolate and destroy. Human packs could choose their battles, hitting weak points while avoiding strong defenses. The tactical initiative had completely shifted to humanity. Kyung-mi received reports from across the combat zones. Human casualties were low because they only fought when they had overwhelming advantage. Vrin casualties were climbing because they were constantly reacting, constantly off balance, constantly afraid. The longer this continued, the more the balance of power shifted. She sent a message to all human fleet commanders. Continue the pressure. Do not give them time to rest or reorganize. Keep moving, keep attacking, keep them guessing. Remember that we are the hunters now. We choose when and where we fight. We control the pace of this war. Every day that passes, we become stronger and they become weaker. The transformation was complete. The Vrin Empire, which had spent decades as the hunters, conquering weaker species with overwhelming force, had become the hunted. They were experiencing what it felt like to be prey, to be constantly watched, constantly vulnerable, never safe. Their warriors had nightmares about human ships appearing from the darkness. Their commanders jumped at shadows and saw threats everywhere. Kyung-mi understood that wars were not just won with weapons and tactics. They were won in the minds of soldiers and leaders. Break their confidence, create doubt and fear, make them question everything, and victory would follow. The Vrin had superior numbers and technology, but humans had something more important. They had the predator's instinct, the hunter's patience, and the survivor's determination. Reports from neutral observers began describing what was happening as a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The smaller force was systematically dismantling the larger one through superior strategy and psychological warfare. Military academies across the galaxy would study this campaign for generations. But for Kyung-mi, it was not about glory or recognition. It was about survival and victory. Humanity had been attacked without provocation. They had been threatened with destruction and slavery. Now they were showing the galaxy what happened when you tried to make prey out of Earth's apex predators. The hunt would continue until the Vrin understood their mistake. And then perhaps there would be peace. Ambassador Tae-young stood before the Galactic Council, representing humanity in the most important diplomatic session in human history. The council chamber was massive, designed to hold representatives from 40 different species. Today, every seat was filled. Every species wanted to understand what was happening between humanity and the Vryn Empire. The council leader, a being called Speaker Voth from the ancient Kalari species, addressed Tai Yang with concern in his voice. Ambassador, we have received troubling reports about human military activities. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that frankly terrify many members of this council. We need to understand what humanity is and what you intend to do with your power. Tai Yang had prepared for this moment. He knew that humanity's performance in the war had shocked the galaxy. Species that had considered humans to be just another young race were now afraid of what they had seen. He needed to be honest but also careful. The wrong words could turn fear into hostility. He activated a holographic display showing footage from recent battles. The council watched in silence as human forces demonstrated tactics and strategies they had never seen before. Mining equipment converted into weapons within days. Colony ships transformed into military carriers. Soldiers manufacturing ammunition from captured enemy materials. Ships coordinating across vast distances with perfect timing. Wounded fighters continuing to battle with injuries that would have incapacitated most species. One video showed a human soldier with a broken arm still operating a weapon with her other hand, directing fire against Vryn troops. Another showed a damaged ship with life support failing, yet the crew continued their mission for another 6 hours before accepting rescue. A third showed human engineers building a functional defense system from scrapped parts in less than 2 days. Speaker Voth spoke quietly. This is what concerns us, Ambassador. Your people do not stop. They adapt instantly to any situation. They turn defeat into motivation rather than despair. They fight with an intensity that seems almost unnatural. Where does this come from? Tai Yang nodded slowly. To understand humans, you need to understand Earth. Our home world is what we call a death world. Nearly every other species in this council evolved on planets with relatively mild conditions. Stable climates, abundant resources, few natural predators. Earth was different. Earth tried to kill us constantly. He showed images of Earth's history. Ice ages that covered continents. Droughts that lasted for years. Predators that were faster, stronger, and more deadly than early humans. Disease and starvation and environmental catastrophes. Our ancestors survived all of this without natural weapons, without armor, without great speed or strength. We survived through our minds and our refusal to give up. A council member from the Thexian Collective, a species known for their logical thinking, asked a question. But how does this explain your current military success? Many species have difficult evolutionary histories. Few demonstrate the capabilities we have witnessed from humanity. Tai Yang smiled slightly. The answer is in our hunting strategy. Most predators on most worlds are ambush hunters or speed hunters. They strike fast and either succeed or give up. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We would chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. We were not the fastest, but we could keep running when everything else had to stop. He displayed more data. This is what you are seeing in the war. We pursue objectives until they are achieved. We do not accept defeat as final. Every setback is analyzed for lessons. Every loss motivates us to fight harder. The Vryn attacked us expecting a quick surrender. Instead, they awakened millions of years of evolutionary programming that made humans the most successful pursuit predators Earth ever produced. Another council member, a Vrilic military advisor, spoke with obvious fear. Ambassador, your species has been at war for only 8 months. In that time, you have developed 17 new weapon systems, created entirely new tactical doctrines, and adapted to space warfare, as if you had been doing it for centuries. How is this possible? Tai Yang answered calmly. Adaptability. On Earth, species that could not adapt quickly went extinct. Humans learned to live in every environment, from frozen tundra to burning deserts. We learned to eat almost anything, use almost any material as a tool, and adjust our strategies based on circumstances. This is not special human magic. This is what survival required on our world. Speaker Voth looked troubled. You understand why this frightens us. The Vryn Empire has conquered 40 systems. They have defeated species with more advanced technology and larger populations. Yet humanity, a species that only reached space a few generations ago, is systematically destroying them. If you can do this to the Vryn, what could you do to us? The question hung in the air. Every representative waited for Tai Yang's answer. This was the critical moment. How he responded could determine humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. He chose his words very carefully. We could do nothing to you because you have not attacked us. Humanity does not seek conquest or dominance. We never wanted this war. The Vryn attacked our diplomatic mission and threatened our extinction. We are fighting for survival, not glory. Once this threat is eliminated, we will return to peaceful exploration and trade. But, he continued, his voice becoming harder, let me be completely clear about one thing. Humanity remembers. We remember every attack, every threat, every species that tried to harm us. The Vryn will learn that attacking humanity was the worst mistake they ever made, not because we are cruel, but because we never stop. We will pursue this war until victory is achieved, no matter how long it takes or what it costs. A small species called the Prill, who had been conquered by the Vryn decades ago, spoke up. Ambassador, you describe persistence hunting. You say humans chase prey until it collapses. Is this what you are doing to the Vryn Empire? Chasing them until they can no longer run? Taeyang nodded. Yes, exactly. The Vryn are learning what Earth's large animals learned millions of years ago. You cannot outrun a human. You can be faster, stronger, and better armed. But if a human decides to hunt you, your only hope is to fight and win immediately. Once the chase begins, it ends only when the human chooses to stop. And humans almost never choose to stop. The council chamber was silent. Representatives looked at each other with worried expressions. They were beginning to understand something important. Humanity was not just another species. They were apex predators that had been shaped by millions of years of survival on a world that constantly tried to kill them. And now those apex predators were loose in the galaxy. Speaker Voth finally spoke. Ambassador Taeyang, this council will not interfere in your war with the Vryn Empire. They attacked you without provocation, and you have the right to defend yourselves. But understand that we will be watching very carefully. The galaxy needs to know if humanity can be trusted with the power you possess. Taeyang bowed respectfully. That is all we ask. Watch and judge us by our actions. We will show you that humanity can be the galaxy's strongest protector, or its most dangerous enemy. The choice belongs to those who decide whether to be our friends or our prey. As he left the council chamber, Taeyang knew that his words had achieved their purpose. The galaxy now understood that humanity was not to be threatened or attacked, but he also knew that his warning was not just diplomatic rhetoric. It was simple truth. Humanity had evolved to be persistence hunters, and once the hunt began, they would pursue their prey across the stars if necessary. The Vryn Empire was learning this lesson. The rest of the galaxy had just been given a warning. The question now was whether anyone would be foolish enough to ignore it. General Bora walked through the corridors of the Vryn flagship, her boots echoing on metal floors designed for reptilian feet. This ship had been the pride of the Vryn Empire, a massive war vessel that had led the conquest of dozens of worlds. Now it served as the location for the most important meeting in galactic history. The Vryn Empire was about to surrender. 14 months. That was how long the war had lasted. 14 months from the first attack on the human diplomatic mission to this moment. In galactic terms, it was impossibly short. Most interstellar wars lasted years or decades. But this war had been different from the beginning. Humanity had not fought to gain territory or resources. They had fought to prove a point. And that point had been proven beyond any doubt. Bora entered the command chamber where the Vryn leaders waited. She recognized Supreme Commander Vrash from intelligence reports. He had led the Vryn military for 20 years, overseeing their expansion across the galaxy. Now he stood with his head lowered, his body language showing defeat and submission. Around him, other Vryn officers and political leaders waited with similar postures. The general took her position at the center of the room. Cameras from every major galactic news network were recording this moment. She had insisted on that. The entire galaxy needed to see what happened when you attacked humanity. This was not just about the Vryn. This was a message to every species watching. Supreme Commander Vrash, Bora said formally on behalf of the Vryn Empire, do you accept the terms of unconditional surrender as presented by humanity? Her voice was calm but carried throughout the chamber. There was no anger or triumph in her tone. This was simply business being concluded. Vrash raised his head slightly. Yes. The Vryn Empire surrenders unconditionally. We accept all terms presented by humanity. His voice was rough with emotion. His people had never surrendered before. They had never needed to. Until now. Bora nodded and accessed a holographic display. The surrender terms appeared in the air, visible to everyone in the room and everyone watching across the galaxy. She read them aloud, ensuring there was no confusion. First, humanity claims no Vryn territory. All worlds currently under Vryn control will remain under Vryn control. Second, humanity demands no tribute or reparations. The Vryn will pay nothing to humanity. Third, all Vryn military forces will be reduced to defensive levels only, with monitoring by neutral observers. Fourth, the Vryn Empire will release all conquered species that wish independence and will interfere with no sovereign governments. She paused, letting those terms sink in. Across the galaxy, species watched in amazement. Humanity had won a total military victory. They could have demanded anything. They could have taken Vryn worlds, enslaved their population, or destroyed their civilization. Instead, they demanded almost nothing. But then Bora continued to the fifth and most important term. Any act of unprovoked military aggression by the Vryn Empire against any species, anywhere in the galaxy, will be considered an act of war against humanity. And humanity will respond. This protection extends to all species, not just those friendly to humanity. We will not allow the Vryn to return to their old ways. She looked directly at Vrash. Do you understand these terms? Do you accept them fully and without reservation? The Supreme Commander nodded slowly. We understand, we accept. The Vryn Empire will honor these terms. He spoke the words, but everyone could see the defeat in his eyes. His species had been broken not just militarily, but psychologically. Bora then turned to address the cameras directly, knowing that billions of beings across hundreds of worlds were watching. Let me be clear about what has happened here. Humanity did not start this war. We offered friendship and received violence. We responded not with revenge, but with justice. We have taken nothing because we want nothing except peace and security. But, she continued, her voice hardening, let every species in this galaxy understand one simple truth. Humanity protects what is ours and those who cannot protect themselves. We have proven that we can defeat any aggressor, no matter how powerful they believe themselves to be. The Vryn learned this lesson at great cost. Others can choose to learn it the easy way by simply leaving us and our friends alone. She deactivated the holographic display and looked back at Vrash. Your military has been dismantled systematically. Your officers know fear for the first time. Your soldiers have nightmares about human attacks. This was not cruelty. This was education. You needed to understand what it means to be prey instead of predator. Now you know. The Vryn commander said nothing. What could he say? His empire had conquered 40 star systems over decades of warfare. They had believed themselves to be the galaxy's ultimate military power. Then they encountered humanity and discovered they were wrong. The humans had studied them, adapted to them, and hunted them until the Vryn broke. Bora prepared to leave, but she had one more message to deliver. This surrender ends the war between our species, but it begins something new. Humanity is now the galaxy's apex predator. We did not seek this position, but we will not refuse it. Every species must decide whether they want humanity as a protector, a partner, or an enemy. Choose wisely. She walked out of the command chamber, leaving the Vryn leaders to contemplate their defeat. Outside the flagship, human ships waited in perfect formation. They had taken minimal damage in the final battles because the Vryn had essentially given up. When an enemy believes they cannot win, they stop fighting effectively. Humanity had understood this and used it perfectly. News of the surrender spread across the galaxy within hours. Reactions were mixed. Some species celebrated, especially those who had been conquered by the Vryn. They saw humanity as liberators. Other species felt fear, worried about what humanity might do with their proven military superiority. Neutral species carefully analyzed what had happened, trying to understand the implications. What everyone agreed on was that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. For thousands of years, military power had been based on technology and numbers. Species with better weapons and larger fleets dominated those with less. But humanity had shown that strategy, adaptability, and psychological warfare could defeat superior forces. They had shown that persistence and determination could overcome any advantage. Military academies across the galaxy immediately began studying human tactics. How did they coordinate so effectively? How did they maintain morale under impossible conditions? How did they turn every setback into an opportunity? The answers were found in human evolutionary history. Earth had shaped humans into the ultimate survivors, and survival skills translated perfectly to warfare. But perhaps the most important lesson was about humanity's nature. They had won a complete military victory and demanded almost nothing. This was not mercy. This was strategic thinking. Humanity understood that conquered enemies remained enemies, but defeated enemies who were treated fairly could become allies or at least neutral parties. The Vryn would never forget their defeat, but they also would never forget that humanity could have destroyed them and chose not to. Bora returned to her ship and transmitted her report to Earth. The war is over. Humanity has achieved total victory. The Vryn Empire is no longer a threat to us or anyone else. Our reputation as warriors is now established across the galaxy. No species will attack us lightly. We have proven that Earth's apex predators can dominate any battlefield, any environment, any enemy. She added one final note. But we must be careful. Fear can be useful, but it can also create enemies. We need to show the galaxy that humanity is dangerous only to those who threaten peace. We must be the protectors, not the conquerors. We must use our power to maintain stability, not to dominate others. This is how apex predators survive long-term. Not by killing everything, but by maintaining balance. The message was received and understood. Humanity had become the galaxy's apex predator not through size or strength, but through intelligence, adaptability, and the simple refusal to accept defeat. They had shown that humans were the most dangerous hunters in existence, because they never stopped hunting once they started. But they had also shown wisdom in victory, taking only what was necessary and offering protection to those who needed it. The galaxy had a new hierarchy, and at its peak stood humanity. Not because they demanded that position, but because they had earned it through blood, sacrifice, and the ancient instincts that made them survive on a world that tried to kill them for millions of years. The hunt was over. The lesson was learned, and the galaxy would never forget what happened when someone made the mistake of attacking Earth's children.